The sun had barely risen over the far edges of the Arizona desert when everything changed for Colt Marrow in one breath-stopping heartbeat. He walked into his stable expecting the usual, dust drifting like golden specks, the soft snorts of his horses, the calm rhythm of a lonely cowboy's morning. But he froze mid-step, because right there on a bed of hay, wrapped in a worn blanket and lit by a thin sliver of daylight, lay a young Apache woman, unconscious, trembling, and bruised. She looked like life itself had chased her to the very edge of the world until she collapsed inside his stable as her last bit of refuge. Colt felt his chest tighten. He knew instantly that nothing about this day, or his future, was going to stay the same. If you believe in human kindness, second chances, and empathy, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Touch of Kindness. Your support helps stories like this reach more hearts. Colt stayed completely still, trying to understand what he was seeing. The woman's long black hair spilled over her shoulder like a cascade of ink. Her torn clothes and swollen wrists told the story of a rough escape. And yet, there was a quiet dignity in her even in sleep. The nearby horses sensed something fragile and unfamiliar, they snorted softly, almost protectively. For a long moment Colt just listened, the wind brushing through the wooden boards, the faint breathing of the stranger. Something moved inside him, something he hadn't felt since the accident that took his younger sister and left him carrying a weight no one could see but everyone sensed. Life had dulled him, hollowed him out, made him wary of everything and everyone. But now, looking at this woman placed unexpectedly in his care, he felt a shift inside him, like the creak of a door long locked finally opening. Still cautious, he crouched beside her without touching. The blanket rose slightly with each breath. He whispered a quiet prayer under his breath, he wasn't even sure why. Maybe for her. Maybe for himself. Outside, the morning sun brightened, painting the desert in warm shades of amber and promise. But inside the stable, everything felt suspended, as if the world was waiting for Colt to make a choice. He stood up to go fetch water, but the woman's eyelids fluttered. She winced, tried to lift herself, but the pain shot through her body and she fell back with a soft, helpless sound that hit Colt like a punch. He spoke gently, even though he wasn't sure she could hear. He brought a bucket of cool water, placing it beside her. When she finally opened her eyes, they were a deep, rich brown, watchful, guarded, but not afraid. He introduced himself quietly. She didn't answer at first, she just studied him, reading more than his name, reading his posture, his hands, the softness or hardness in him. At last she whispered her name, Tavaya. Her voice carried strength and exhaustion at the same time. Colt nodded, repeating her name softly so she'd know he meant no harm. She flinched when she tried to sit again, and Colt instinctively knelt beside her, offering support. She stiffened at the touch, then slowly exhaled, allowing it. Tavaya explained in broken, tired words that she had been running for 2 nights. A group of men from town, men she worked for, had decided she was an easy target because she lived alone on the edge of the reservation. They wanted her land and figured threats would scare her into giving it up. When she resisted, things turned violent. She escaped through rough terrain until she collapsed here. She didn't even know whose stable it was, she just prayed for shelter. Colt's calm face hid the storm rising inside him. Anger, real, trembling anger, burned through him, not because she trespassed, but because he knew the kind of men who preyed on the vulnerable. He had seen it after losing his sister. Tavaya's story pressed right on the wounds he thought he'd buried. He helped her drink, then convinced her to stay in the shade while he went for supplies. When he returned with a medical kit, clean cloths, and warm food, she had already slipped into an uneasy sleep, her body finally giving in to safety. Colt watched her rest, noticing the sunlight filtering through the wooden slats and settling on her face like a blessing the world had denied her for too long. He tended her injuries with care. Tavaya's eyes opened now and then, each time less afraid. She watched him with that quiet Apache stillness, observant, strong in spirit even while hurt. He admired that. She reminded him of the wild desert mares, scarred but unbroken. The day wore on, sunlight softening into afternoon gold. Colt brought a chair into the stable and stayed nearby, not hovering, just letting her feel she wasn't alone. He worked with his horses, glancing back at her often. Tavaya ate slowly, gaining strength piece by piece. After a long silence, she asked why he was helping her. Colt didn't answer right away. He leaned against a stall, looking out at the wide field glowing under the sun. Then he said he had once failed someone he loved, failed to protect her, failed to be there. His sister Mira had been just 13. He'd been away on a long cattle haul the night she got caught in a flash flood miles from home. If he'd been there, he believed he could have saved her. That belief carved a scar in him deeper than any knife. Tavaya listened with the calm empathy of someone who knew what loss felt like. She told him guilt was a heavy horse, one that never stopped bucking. Then she said maybe she ended up in his stable for a reason, that life doesn't send signs without purpose. Maybe this was his chance to choose differently. Her words hit Colt so deep he had to steady himself. As evening crept in, Colt carried her into his house so she wouldn't have to sleep on hay again. His small ranch home was simple: pine floors, sunlight through cotton curtains, photos of horses, and one faded picture of Mira smiling on her last birthday. Tavaya paused at the photo, touching the frame lightly. She said Mira had kind eyes. Colt couldn't speak. Over the next few days, Tavaya grew stronger. But the men who hurt her hadn't given up. Colt realized it when he found tracks near his fence line. A sharp protectiveness rose in him, not just from anger, but from the fact that Tavaya had brought something back into his life. A sense of purpose. A meaning he'd lost after Mira. He started teaching Tavaya how to work with horses, something he never shared with strangers. She learned fast: gentle hands, steady voice. The horses grew attached to her, sensing her resilience. Colt found himself watching her more than he meant to, the way she braided his mare's mane, the way she breathed the open desert air like she was reclaiming her place in the world. One late afternoon, as the sun turned everything gold, Tavaya stood by the corral, healthy and strong again, a small smile on her lips. Colt realized she had changed the rhythm of his days. The ranch felt alive again. He felt alive again. But danger came back without warning. 3 men rode onto his land. The same men she'd fled. Colt stepped in front of her without thinking. They claimed Tavaya was tied to a labor debt, an obvious lie. They demanded she be handed over. Tavaya trembled, but only for a heartbeat. Then she stood straight beside Colt, chin lifted, courage steady. Colt had known fear before, but never this fear, the fear of losing someone who had come into his life like a sunrise he didn't expect. He warned them they were trespassing. They laughed and reached for her. Colt moved faster. He wasn't a violent man, but years of ranch work had hardened him. He fought with a fury born not only from justice but from every ounce of guilt and grief he'd carried since Mira. Tavaya grabbed a fallen tool and swung to protect herself. The horses kicked the fencing, sensing danger. The men weren't expecting either of them to fight back. Colt tackled the ringleader to the dirt while Tavaya sent another stumbling backward. When the sheriff arrived, an old friend Colt had called earlier, the men were handcuffed, furious but defeated.